Okay, we've got a few things to discuss here today. This is with the transmission lowered. I've already removed the converter that was in there. This one is the 6-cylinder converter. I just stuck it in there to see what was going on and then realized that the 6-cylinder converter simply will not work with the V8 because you'll notice it has a ring gear attached to it. The V8 carries a flex plate with a ring gear on it, so that's wholly incompatible. We won't even get into the size of the bolt pattern spacing differences. So the converter that came out is the wrong splines. Is for the later 70 and up transmission, so that doesn't work. So both of the converters that I own will not work in this setup, which means I'm going to have to buy a new one. Now, I can buy an adapter input shaft that will match the splines of this converter to the existing transmission. The only problem with that is I don't know what this converter actually is. No idea on the stall speed or anything like that. So it's kind of a mystery, and I'm reluctant to spend $200 on a shaft when for another 200-ish bucks I can just buy a new converter and know exactly what I'm getting. So that's the route it looks like we're going to take. In the process of doing all that, I had to remove the exhaust, which was just installed. And this is the Mustang H-pipe that was modified to fit this car. And I don't really know that this is going to be helpful to anybody that's thinking of following in the footsteps, but that's where the cuts were made and the adjustments made to this H-pipe. So it's possible to reconfigure this to work in this car, but it takes, effort. So it's not a simple bolt-in change. The other thing I wanted to mention is the exhaust manifolds. These are the Hypo 289 Mustang exhaust manifolds, and as I said in the previous video, we had a problem with them leaking. Now, the passenger side one does not appear to have any leakage at the bottom. All these look like they're pretty good. All of these show that they've been leaking along the bottom. You can see the discoloration and soot there. So we have a problem here. I'm going to have to do some grinding, I believe, to the heads to try to get these things to fit flush. And you'll notice that the raised area on this side is much different than the raised area on the driver's side, or excuse me, the passenger side. So these do not match each other side to side for whatever reason. So I'm going to have to do something to try to make those work. According to the exhaust shop, the gap wasn't really big, so I don't think I'm going to have to take much off, but I have to figure out exactly where I've got to grind the head down along this bottom edge. The other thing you'll notice on these is these witness marks of carbon that show the port size on the heads versus the inlet here on the exhaust manifold. And that's pretty significant. It's obviously a big slamming stop for the exhaust gas that's trying to come out there at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind this and bevel it to make that transition smoother. Something I should have done previously, but it was kind of difficult to tell with just the gaskets exactly what you were going to wind up with, because the gaskets match these manifolds. They didn't really match the head, so it was kind of hard to guess where it was going to be. I would have had to make some sort of template really to tell how different all that was going to be. But now we know. We got a clear vision of how far off those are. So that's going to be the process and the project that we're going to take on here in the interim while we're waiting for a new converter. So here is the exhaust manifold issue. This is where the Hypo manifold is hitting the head bolt boss on these world heads. Now I don't know if this would happen on a standard Ford head or not, but that's where the point of interference is. And I've tried grinding a little bit away here, but I'm not confident that it's still not supporting that manifold away, and I'm kind of reluctant to grind too much away on either of these parts, more than what I've already done. Now I'm a little reluctant to do this, but it's what the guy that did the exhaust for me suggested, is that I put these header gaskets on versus those crappy exhaust manifold gaskets that come in the kit. And this is the part number of the ones for the world heads, because the port size is larger than the standard exhaust manifold gaskets would be, or header gaskets for regular 289-302. So if you have these world heads, or if you have an aftermarket aluminum head also, there's other gaskets that may be specific to that application. So this might just give me enough thickness that I won't have that problem. Fingers crossed. So as much as I was going to go with the metal to metal joint, I think I'm going to try these. I mean, worst cases, we can always take them out or do something different, I guess, if it doesn't work. But I think we'll try these. These are not cheap. They're like 38 bucks for a pair of them. So I bought them. I might as well use them. One thing you might remember from the last video is that we had the chrome alternator on there that came with this engine. I'm sure that alternator was manufactured or remanufactured in that big country that has the big wall in it. And it didn't work. The generator light was on the dash, so figured that one was no good. This is the one off of the original 6-cylinder. And it works perfectly fine. The only thing you have to do is you do have to reclock the back housing, because all of the terminals were rotated to the wrong place, and one of them was impacting the cylinder head. So that's something that you can do pretty easily. You just take these 4 bolts out of there and just turn the back housing to where you want it and put the bolts back in. It's actually pretty easy. Assuming, of course, that the alternator comes apart, which did take a little bit of hammer work on my part, but no, that solved that. I hope. I haven't fired the car up yet to see if the generator light goes out. So I went ahead and I bought a remanufactured alternator from my local Napa. The funny thing about this alternator is that the build date on it is from 2011. This thing's been on the shelf since 2011. This is currently 2024. So that tells you how long that thing's been sitting on the shelf in a box. And the box actually kind of looked like it was that old. So I believe that's legit. At any rate, I put this alternator on and it didn't charge. Some more testing, and I mean a lot of testing, extensive testing, checking the continuity of wires and connections, and quadruple checking that everything was hooked up correctly. I was pulling what little hair I have in my head out, trying to get this thing to work. Eventually, after discussing it with another guy who's smarter than me, hi Wayne, I decided that it was time to pull the alternators off and just bench test them, put them in the vise and wire them up and run them with a drill, which I did. And it's a little bit of a convoluted arrangement, but it works. And spinning the alternator, I started with this one. Well, actually, no, I did not start with that one. I started with this one. And spun it, and it put out voltage. Okay, which further led me to believe that the alternators weren't the problem. Put that one on the bench. Spun it. Put out 0 voltage. Ah, that's a problem. So took this one off. Put the chrome one back on. Everything works. Car charges. I have no idea why or what changed in that simple act of changing alternators around for like the 5th or 6th time. But now the charging system is working. So there's that. And it's a frustrating thing when you fix something and you don't know why it's fixed. Here's a new problem I haven't run into, and I've had a couple of 1960s Fords. The turn signal cam switch, usually these ends break off and it won't self-cancel anymore, or you won't get any detents here. Not the case with this one. The turn signal function is perfect, but what doesn't work is the horn. And I figured out it's not the horns, it's something that was in the steering column. So I assumed it was going to be the switch, because that's all part of this. These little 2 spring guys over here are what makes contact with the underside of the steering wheel as you turn it, and you have to connect these two to complete the circuit for the horn to blow. So if you run a jumper wire across these two, on this car, the horn blows. So that's not the problem, it's not the switch. So what is it? Well, it has to be in the steering wheel. And if we look at the back side, there really isn't anything functional there where those 2 contacts make contact with the back side of the wheel. You can see the 2 separate rings there for the circuit to be completed. You have to connect those. But if you're pushing the horn ring, it's not doing the thing. It's not moving whatever it needs to move to have those 2 things come together. So there's something inside here that is amiss. And I'm not exactly sure what it is. What's supposed to move? It doesn't seem like any of this does. So I'm a little baffled by it. Ultimately, I don't care because I'm replacing the steering wheel with a completely different kind. But if your horn's not working and you can jump the contacts on the switch and make it blow, chances are something's going on inside the steering wheel. Well, one of the changes I wanted to make to this car was the steering wheel. The original steering wheel wasn't in the best of shape, and as I just pointed out to you guys, the horn didn't function with that steering wheel in there. The horn ring just wasn't doing its thing anymore. So I wanted to get a different steering wheel. I wanted to try to replicate a kind of a 1960s rally car look, or what the Australian GT Falcons might have had back in the day. So this is what I got. I wanted a 3-spoke steering wheel with the perforations and the spokes, and I wanted it to be leather. I didn't want a foam steering wheel, which is what a lot of these that look like this are. I don't like the foam. I don't like the feel of it. I don't think it holds up very well. It's just kind of a chintzy, I think, way to make a steering wheel. And I really wasn't into the wood look. I don't think there's no other wood in this car anywhere. It's not a Jaguar, so why are we, or a Jaguar, so why are we putting wood in it? So I didn't dig on that, or even the faux wood steering wheels out of a Mustang. Didn't care for it. So I searched high and low for a steering wheel that was this design and was only an inch smaller diameter than the original one. And the reason for that is this car has manual steering, and if you go any smaller than that, the steering effort really increases quite a bit. So that's the reason we went with this steering wheel. And the brand is W Power, and you really should see the box that this thing comes in. It's the most overkill packaging I've ever seen in my life. And it even included a fabric tote bag for some reason. I have no idea. I guess you're supposed to carry your steering wheel around with you wherever you go. But that's what I got off of eBay. It's, of course, made in that big country across the Pacific that we don't really like that much. And it's not the greatest quality. It is nice looking. It is real leather. The stitching is, decent. But it is a little flexy. It's not the sturdiest aluminum steering wheel I've ever held in my hands. I would have liked to have gone with like a Momo or a Sparco brand out of Italy. Those are very, very good wheels. They're also very, very expensive. But the problem with those is that they don't come in this diameter. Everything is much smaller. So the steering effort would be, in my opinion, too high. This one is even going to increase the steering effort a little bit. But if I hold the original wheel up to this one, pardon my reach, you can see that it's not a lot different. You know, it's an inch overall. So that shouldn't be too bad for the steering effort. But it's got a horn button. And this hub adapter to put it on the car is actually a different brand. The steering wheel, it did not come with that. You have to buy the mounting kit separately. That was also an eBay purchase. And let me get the box and I'll show you what the brand name of that is. And this is the hub kit. This is from Forever Sharp. I've never heard of them. I had no idea. Stylish, affordable quality. You gotta love it. And there's the part number for the one that fits this car. Now it comes with a bunch of extra doodads and a little extra wiring that you don't need and 2 extra column cover things that you don't need. And I want to talk about the column cover while we are here because this will be a problem for everybody. So the column cover fills in the gap between the adapter, which is this piece, which is a nice billet piece. And then this is the cover that fills up the gap there. This is just stamped steel. It's nothing fancy. The problem is, on this application, it is too big and it will rub on your actual steering column. And of course, that's going to make grinding and squeaking noises that are going to drive you crazy. So you're going to have to spend some time. I did mine at the bench grinder and just kept going around and grinding it down until I got it to a point where it would fit nicely and it wouldn't rub anymore. So be aware of that going in, that they are not, you know, custom fit necessarily to every application. But it's an annoyance, but it's not something that anybody can overcome pretty easily. So there it is. That's the new and improved steering wheel, and we'll give it a test drive and see what we think. But it's certainly going to be much more comfortable to hold on to and just pilot the car down the road without that thin plastic steering wheel. They're just not very comfortable. All right, this is going to be the closing summary for this installment. It's getting a little long. The alternator problems. So what I figured out that happened was the chrome alternator that's in the car was one that I didn't touch. And the 6-cylinder one and this one, I had to reclock the housings so that these were in the correct position, because otherwise these fouled on the cylinder head. And you can probably guess what happened. When I took these apart, which you only really have to take this front cover off and move it, the internals in the rear housing came apart just a little bit. And that most likely caused the brushes to disembark from the armature. I took the 6-cylinder one apart, and not only were the brushes not where they should be, but one of them was completely broken off. The copper lead was severed, so that's why that one didn't work. And I suspect that there's something going on with the brushes on this one too. I'm going to take it apart and fix it and keep it as a spare. It's fine. Other notes and things, I was able to drive this car for the last 2 days and found a few issues, of course, teething problems as they always are. The fan belt slips and squeals, and it's actually slipping on the crank pulley, which is aluminum. Don't know why. I have it as tight as I can possibly get at the alternator. I don't know if that aluminum pulley is somehow become too polished to endure the tension of this admittedly short belt. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to have to get a steel crank pulley and replace that or what. So that remains to be seen. It has a hunting idle. It idles up and down and up and down, and it's just not right. I've looked for vacuum leaks. I've checked all the usual suspects there. Fiddled with the carb settings a little bit, but I don't really think the settings are what the problem is. I don't know if it's internal or for something completely unrelated. I haven't had time to really dive into it. Car's drivable. It's only when you are at a stop or at idle that it exhibits the behavior that's a problem. Just driving along, it seems to be fine. So that was a used carburetor that I rebuilt, and I don't see why it would be a problem because it really wasn't horrible inside, but we're going to take that under advisement. And the only other thing else that, well, no, there's two things. One item is our wonderful new steering wheel, which is wonderful. It's very lightweight feeling in your hands. That's a big change from the plastic one, so I like that about it. But there is one problem with it. The turn signals don't cancel. Now, having said that, I kind of recall that in the box of doohickeys for the hub, that there may have been a little dowel type thing in there that the instructions did not mention whatsoever, and common sense would tell me that that might be the canceling device for the turn signal. So, gonna have to revisit that when I have a chance. The other thing that happened here was the belt molding for this door got caught on the window, and it half took it out. So I don't know why that happened. I don't know if the tabs on it are not working right, but this one on this side is behaving itself and works as it should. So I pulled it out, and we'll have to investigate that further. Teething pains. On the upside, however, car runs cool. There's no problem with it getting hot, which is fantastic. That was something I was definitely worried about because there's no shroud on these. So that's a great thing. Exhaust leak is solved with just a little bit of grinding to the manifold. The grinding on the head really didn't do anything. I really couldn't get enough off or get in there really to do it. So I did it on the back side of the exhaust manifold and used the header gaskets, and that took care of that. So that's perfect. You can hear the idle at the beginning of this video. And we'll do another video showing it running and driving and all that when I have a way to hold the camera while I'm driving the car, because right now I don't have anything. I'm not sure that the choke thermostat is opening at the right spot. That still needs some tinkering. But other than that, we don't have any major leaks. There is a little bit of oil on the floor sometimes from what I suspect is probably the rear main seal, because Windsor. And always transmission fluid. Not a puddle or anything, but it's always a little dampness there. It's dripping from somewhere. I think the pan might be distorted. It was the problem that I had with my Lightning on that transmission. Nothing would solve it without being a new pan, so I did that. And I think this one might be pretty hammered on this car too. It's probably been over-tightened too many times, so might look into getting a replacement. At any rate, that's where we are. The car is running and driving. It sounds great. It has good forward thrust, but I still think there's tuning to be done. More experimentation with timing settings and that kind of thing. And the transmission does not shift very well with this engine in front of it. It shifts way too early. It's not like it's slipping or anything, but it goes from first to second gear almost instantly at like 10 miles an hour, and then it shifts in the third at like 20 or something. It just shifts way too early, and I think that's a part of the problem is the valve body that it has, being that green dot version. The shift kit that I put in it did very little. The 1-2 shift is a little firmer, and the 2-3 you can feel it now. It doesn't just glide into the next gear, but it really doesn't make that much of a difference. But for the money that it cost, I guess it was worth it. Again, we're going to leave it here because this one's getting long, and I'll come back with the next one hopefully and show you how the car runs and drives. Until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you real soon.